Capes on the Couch podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Dr. Issues is a psychiatrist, but he is not your psychiatrist and does not have knowledge of your individual situation. For any personal mental health concerns, please consult your own healthcare providers. For medical emergencies, please call 911 or the designated number in your area immediately. Remember that you are not alone and help is out there.
Hello and welcome to Capes on the Couch, where comics get counseling. I'm Anthony Sitko, joined once again by my good friend, Dr. Issues.
Hello, everybody. Wait, what was that line?
Where comics get counseling, yes. My sister, Ever the Grammarian, said to me, you know, where comics need counseling is kind of grammatically awkward. She said it should be either where comics get counseling or when comics need counseling. And I said, well, let's go with where comics get counseling. So the tagline is just ever slightly different, but it makes more grammatical sense. So I apologize for those listeners that have gotten accustomed to our existing tagline. I don't know who really gets attached to a podcast tagline, but it's a minor tweak that will hopefully satisfy those of you who, like my sister, are grammatically inclined.
I'm going to put a positive spin on it. If you were able to listen to all of our episodes and not get triggered too badly, then we just helped treat your obsessive compulsive personality disorder. Good for you.
There you go. If you made it through 21 episodes and you're still listening, this being episode number 22, if you're still listening after all this and you haven't said, well, these guys don't know the difference between, you know, where they get it and when they need it and all this other stuff, then we appreciate that. So thank you for sticking with us through the tough times. I'm sure at some point I'll revert back to the original one again, but I literally had to write it down on the script and just because it's rote for me at this point. There's just certain things that I say. So this is issue number 22. Our friend and president level patron Brian has selected this episode, and we are going to be discussing Al Simmons, the one, the only Spawn.
I feel like we should tell people, turn off the lights.
I don't know that that's going to help or hurt them, but this is going to be an interesting one. Just the research and the reading on this character. We're going to get into that in just a sec. But first, as a quick reminder, as always, you can find all of our shows on the Libsyn network, capesonthecouch.live, and you can download us on Google Play, iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn, YouTube, and the iHeartRadio network. Also, a quick, two quick plugs. One, to remember to vote in our Walking Dead listener poll for the October 3rd episode. You can choose right now between Rick Grimes, Negan, and the Governor. So that link is posted on our website as well as a pinned tweet on our Twitter account. Capes on the Couch is our Twitter handle. And also on the website is the link to my Extra Life fundraising page, where if I raise $1,000 in the month of September, I will shave my noggin. And so far, we're doing pretty well, over 10% of the way there. Thank you to those folks who have donated and supported so far. And please continue those donations coming in. As a reminder, again, all those donations go to benefit Children's Specialized Hospital, which is a Children's Miracle Network affiliated hospital in 13 locations across North and Central Jersey that helps treat thousands of kids annually. It's a charity that's very near and dear to my heart, and I've been involved with it for 8 years now. So thank you, everyone who's donated. And if you haven't yet, please go to the website, extra-life.org, and look for my name, Anthony Sitko, or the link is on capesonthecouch.live. It's on our website.
Kids get help. Anthony goes bald. It's win-win.
Yeah. I don't see any downside to it. Anything else we want to mention? Haven't had a chance to watch Typhoid Mary yet. I know we did last week's Typhoid Mary episode because of Iron Fist Season 2, which came out on Friday. I, unfortunately, as I mentioned last week, being a new house and all, I have a lot of work to do in this house. And Netflix, for better or worse, has to fall by the wayside. It pains me to say that, but it's not something I can devote to, because Netflix is a thing where if I sit down to watch it, I need at least like 3-4 hours to watch it because I binge, and I don't have 3-4 hours to binge.
Well, yeah, I'm going to ignore that part of your binge disorder. No, that's not really what that means, people, but point taken. I haven't seen it either. I'll be honest, that's purely because of family and a job.
Yeah, again, same, but be that as it may, I haven't had a chance to check it out yet. I will get around to it, and I'm sure at some point before the month is over, I will have watched all 13 episodes or 10. I think it's a shorter season.
Oh, I think that's a good thing based on the first one.
I think it's a good thing based on most of the Marvel Netflix shows. I think 13 episodes is just a tad too much, and that there's a good amount of, or good or bad amount of filler, I suppose, depending on your definition. There's a substantial amount of filler. We'll put it that way. So getting into this week's episode, Spawn, chosen by Brian, our president level patron. Patreon.com/Capes on the Couch, by the way. You can donate it. You can subscribe at the $1, $3, $5, and $10 levels. $1 gets you a shout out. $3 gets you early access and downloads to a monthly blooper reel. $5 gets you a longer uncensored version of the skit and guarantees that any questions you have will be answered by us. And $10 gets you a president level slot where you can pick one episode a month. And, if we hit $50 a month in Patreon subscribers, we will begin live streaming our recording sessions and letting you chat with us while we record, which is, I think, going to be a lot of fun. So Brian picked Spawn because Brian has been a Spawn fan for many years. I remember back when we were in high school, he had, and he may still have, the DVDs of the HBO show, Keith David as the voice of Al Simmons, Spawn. And just amazing artwork, just a visually compelling show.
Yeah, it was award winning. It was that good, even though it had a pretty short run.
Yeah, I watched an episode or two. I didn't have HBO as a kid or as a teenager. I didn't really have HBO until I was a grown ass man. So I can't say that it was something I watched when it happened. And then when it came time for this episode, Brian actually asked me, he said, have you watched any of the episodes in preparation for the show? And I said no, because we tend to focus on the comic version. Having said that, from my understanding, the show was hewed very closely to the source material. So it's, one of those situations where it wouldn't have been a bad thing to watch the show.
I did watch it when it was originally running. Now, having said that, I don't know exactly how many details I remember from that, but I also had heavily read Spawn, and I'll be honest, I faded off at some point, but I think we're going to get into this when we do the full rundown of the character, because I'm not going to lie, some parts are going to be kind of glossed over, and it's not intentional. It's simply, this is one of those situations where if we really wanted to get into the details of every single arc, it would be another 3 hours or so.
Well, I was going to say, no, we're glossing over, and that is in fact intentional, because there's some stuff in here that we literally didn't even know how to summarize. My only exposure with Spawn at a younger age was the Michael Jai White film, which I did go to see in theaters. And I'm fairly certain I still have the ticket stub for, because fun fact, I have the ticket stub from every film I've seen since Space Jam.
Well, I'm going to ignore your hoarding disorder and just point out
it's a small box. It's not a huge box, but
okay. Whatever makes you feel better. I also saw it in theaters, and that was the point where I think I started to fade with it. I'm not exactly sure if that matches up well. Anyway,
I watched clips of the movie on YouTube just to see. Visually, they captured the source material fantastically. Acting wise and plot wise, but we're not going to focus on that. We're going to focus on the comics. So, Spawn, created by Todd McFarlane in Spawn #1, Image Comics, May of 1992. And I'm not going to get into the whole Image Comics and the spinoff thing and the delays and all of the things associated with Image. Far better people than I have gone into elaborate detail on that. Suffice to say that Todd McFarlane, an amazing artistic talent and incredibly influential. But if there's one thing that I can say about Spawn, at the very least, just from reading this, it's a 90s comic through and through. And I'm going to have a blog post that will be up right around the time this episode is released to go into some of the cultural impacts of Spawn as a 90s comic and the I guess, issues, dare I say, no offense, Doc, but the issues that Spawn has being a product of its time and still attempting to remain relevant while based very much in that product of its era. So that's going to be something we're going to flesh out more because it'll give me a little more opportunity to speak highfalutin-like about it. More about the cultural impact and the zeitgeist rather than the character itself. But so Al Simmons, former Marine and CIA black operative, was killed by one of his partners and sent to hell because he was not a good man while he was alive. So he gets sent to hell and he makes a deal with Malebolgia, which is just the name just rolls off the tongue. Malebolgia.
It sounds like some sort of exotic disease to me.
And it's just, to me, it's very Dante Inferno inspired name. So he makes a deal with Malebolgia, who is a devil, not necessarily the devil, but a devil. In exchange for his soul, he can see his wife again. So Al says, fine, you can have my soul, but I want to see my wife again. Well, Al doesn't read the fine print of this deal and he just goes along with it because where in any Faustian bargain has anyone ever said, before I sign this over, let me read the fine print? Incidentally, I think that would make for a very interesting story. Something like akin to the Devil and Daniel Webster, where you get some lawyer who goes over the fine print, or the Simpsons, where Homer gave his soul to Marge before he could give it to the devil. So Al Simmons returns to the human world 5 years later. He has no memory of who he is or what happened. He's in a very interesting outfit festooned with a beautiful flowing cape, chains and skulls as a belt, and, just sort of across his body everywhere because 90s chains are key.
Cross between goth and biker, I guess.
Yeah, it's the skulls and chains make up. It's a combination of like a belt and what's that thing where like your ammo, like you wear it across your chest? Bandolier. Thank you. Couldn't think of it. I was going to say that thing that Chewbacca carries. So it's like a combination belt and bandolier, and they're just like all over the place. And he can throw the chains out, and his cape has abilities. And he's like, "Who am I? What happened?" In the meantime, he finds out his wife Wanda has now married his best friend, Terry Fitzgerald, and they have a daughter together. Her name is Cyan. They name her after a color. I don't know.
Hey, if it works for Blue Ivy, I mean, come on.
Do you think maybe Beyonce and Jay-Z, that's where they got inspired? Maybe Jigga is really a huge Spawn fan, and he wanted to pay homage without...
I'd say there's a 0% chance of that. Not high, but possible. Highly unlikely.
So Al is now this Spawn, and he's trying to piece his life back together, and he's getting flashes of memories and, of the horrible things that he did and the deal with the devil, etc. Then he gets attacked by Violator, who is alternately this short, fat clown. Think like Danny DeVito. I think Danny DeVito, side note, in the movie would have made a much better Violator than John Leguizamo. Not that John Leguizamo was terrible, but I think Danny DeVito, just, picture Frank Reynolds in face paint. And that's basically what the Violator is. Except the Violator turns into this creepy demon with like a 3-foot underbite and super skinny arms. And there's no sense to the anatomy whatsoever of this thing. It was, again, very 90s. Rob Liefeld looked at this thing and went, "Oh man, I wish I came up with that." Now I need to draw my bodies like that, because the Violator has about as much basis in anatomy as your standard Rob Liefeld drawing. Sorry, I'm never going to pass up an opportunity to take a crap on Rob Liefeld. So Violator turns out to be another demon and a lackey of Malebolgia, who tells him that he's an agent of hell, and that they start fighting and dealing with each other. And Violator's like, "You don't even know why you're here, do you?" And Violator's the one who kind of starts to clue Al in as to who he is and what he is. The other thing that they introduced very early on in the comics was that Spawn's suit had a limited amount of power.
Right.
Protoplasm, or I forget what the name was. Whatever. It wasn't ectoplasm. It wasn't protoplasm. But throughout the comics, there was a timer that counted down of 9,999. And every time he used the suit, the timer would go down. And ostensibly, and I think Violator told him this, if I remember correctly, that once the suit ran out of juice, that once the timer hit 0, or once your power meter hit 0, you were going back to hell, and then your soul would be Malebolgia's forever. They dropped that after like 6 or 7 issues, and it really made me sad because I wanted to see what was going to happen, and I wanted to see if there was a way that he could recharge it, or what was going to happen if when the clock hit 0, or when the timer hit 0, and they just sort of...
Maybe they would have found some sort of mystical, like Elon Musk or something, create a recharging station. Who knows?
So Al is hanging out in the alley with a bunch of bums because they're the only ones who don't reject him based on sight. And one of the bums is named Cogliostro, and he knows the whole history of Hellspawns, and he begins to tell Al a little bit more about who he is and what he is, and he intimates that he knows everything that's going on and that he's not just some random bum in an alley. Then he gets attacked by Angela. She's an agent of heaven who hunts Hellspawns, and if you're a current reader of Marvel Comics or have been for the last couple of years, you will recognize Angela because she is now Thor and Loki's sister. Long story short, she was created by Neil Gaiman when he wrote, I think, 2 issues as a fill-in for Todd McFarlane, and he created the characters. And then Todd and Neil got into a legal dispute over who actually owned the characters. It was settled in Neil's favor. Neil turns around and sells the character of Angela to Marvel Comics, who says, you can do with her what you want. And then they introduce her right after, which one was it? Not Age of Ultron. One of the many character arcs. She gets introduced in Marvel Comics, and she's riding the head of a Celestial or whatever, and she comes to Earth, and she's super pissed off. So that's where she comes from originally, as the pages of Spawn.
This is going to sound so base, but Agent of Heaven, Angela, Angel. I wonder. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And I think in Marvel, or is it originally in Spawn, it's spelled like Heven. Like they don't spell heaven normally. They spell it differently because it's not, whatever. So then he finds out that the order to kill him by his partner was given by Jason Wynn, who is the head of the CIA Black Ops unit. Jason Wynn is given heavenly powers to become the anti-Spawn because there's a Spawn on Earth. And much like Angela was defeated, so they said, well, we have to bring out the big guns because we have to defeat this Hellspawn. We'll give them to the guy who was trying to kill Al Simmons. And he becomes anti-Spawn and basically looks like a cross between the Spawn costume and one of like, I guess like a Knights Templar,
good description.
Or a member, of the Holy Crusades. Like that's the combination of the costume that they come up with for anti-Spawn. But Al Simmons comes out on top because then he fights the Freak, who's another demon-esque character, and he's tortured by some nightmares of his past. Then he meets Harry Houdini, who is a real, actual magician, not just like a, nothing up my sleeve.
Yeah.
He creates real illusions.
Yeah. So
they're illusions, Michael.
Oh, boy. Well, I can't imagine that ever actually being a fight because apparently all you have to do is just punch him in the abdomen and he dies. Oh, well.
So at some point he meets up with Batman. We're not going to get into that because I don't know how canonical that is. Then he finds out his suit is a living being known as Letha of the 7 House of K. I didn't come up with it. Also known as what? K7 Letha?
That's it.
Yeah, K7 Letha. Now here's where things start to get just a little funky. And I apologize in advance for any diehard Spawn fans. But if you're a diehard Spawn fan, you also know that the history of this character is interesting and winding and not at all clear. So we're going to do our best to summarize moving forward, but we're going to gloss over some stuff, as Dr. Issue said at the beginning. This is intentional just because we could get really into the weeds on this, and that's not the plan for this show. Deep breath, here we go. Spawn gets caught up in a battle between heaven and hell. He uses the powers of the green world, which is...
Think Swamp Thing. In other words, he's listening to the earth. When you consider what's going on between heaven and hell, all of the living matter in between is just kind of caught up. So it's like, hey, don't forget about us. Don't destroy us in the process. Okay.
So Spawn uses the power of the green world to listen to Earth and become more powerful. Then he and Angela go to hell to fight Malebolgia. Angela dies, and Spawn kills Malebolgia in retaliation. So then Spawn gets offered the chance to rule Hell, and he declines. And he's like, nope, I don't want that job. I don't need to deal with that. Then he finds out that Cogliostro is really Cain, of Cain and Abel, who killed his brother. So Cain wants to control Hell, and he wants to use Spawn to do it. Spawn wants no part of this. So now Spawn has been rejected by heaven and hell. Then he gets sent to Earth. Now he's in a warehouse with this rotting, maggot-infested corpse. And then his body ends up in hell. And he, along with Sam and Twitch, have to escape. Who are Sam and Twitch? Sam and Twitch are side characters. They're detectives who have been investigating all of the murders and all of the crazy stuff that Spawn has been involved with on Earth since he came back.
I know we usually give short shrift to side issues or spin-offs or things like that. Sam and Twitch is worth your time. Seriously. Well written, great characters.
Okay. Doc is a big fan of Sam and Twitch, and he's expressed great joy over the opportunity to talk about that. So maybe we could talk Sam and Twitch in a future episode.
Good question. I don't know how much we'll get out of it, but I'm glad that it's on the table.
Yeah, I think Jeremy Renner is going to play Twitch in the Jamie Foxx Spawn film. Which
Sweet.
We didn't save this episode for when that happens because I don't know if that is actually, in fact, going to happen at any point. Todd McFarlane's been talking about that Spawn film for years, so I don't know that that's going to happen. So Sam and Twitch have to escape hell. Now here's where things get really wonky. He discovers that Wanda, his ex-wife, has given birth to God and Satan in the forms of Jake and Katie. Set of twins. And we're really going to gloss over stuff because this is heavy stuff. There's lots of allusions to the 12 disciples of Jesus, the 4 horsemen. Armageddon happens, but it gets reset after Spawn eats fruit from the Garden of Eden that was given to him by Mother, who's like above God and Satan. Then Spawn gets resurrected on as an angel, and he has the same power level as God and Satan. So then Spawn eliminates all of the armies of God and Satan and forces them to fight each other without their armies, and then shuts them off from Earth. He closes all the portals between heaven, hell, and Earth and basically says, you two go fight forever and leave us alone. So then he returns to Earth as Al Simmons, and he wants to reconcile with Wanda, but he can't because that's when we find out that he beat her into a miscarriage the day before he died because it was distracting from his work because he was so heavily into killing people that having a child would have distracted from that.
So he went from being a bad guy to a truly evil guy. Great.
If I'm not mistaken, that later got retconned, but we'll get into that. So he once again becomes a Hellspawn. Then he encounters his brother Richard, who we had never heard of mentioned prior to this. Richard's being tortured by his own sins. And then he finds out Mammon, who is another one of the devils, introduced Richard to drugs when Richard was alive and on Earth, and convinced young Al to torture animals, which set Al on the path towards evil and making him decide that he wanted to be a CIA black operative and a Marine, etc., etc. Then he discovers that their mother slept with Mammon to create a great evil. And then Richard sacrifices himself to protect the world and try to seal off Mammon from creating any further trouble. Then in the Endgame storyline, Spawn's symbiote is fighting with him because he rejected all the power he had been given as a god earlier. Cyan, meanwhile, who's a little older, remember, this is Wanda and Terry's daughter. She's now older. She gets these visions, and then she stabs Spawn with a mystical knife that wounds the symbiote, and then the symbiote leaves Al Simmons, and now they're in hell. I think he and Cyan and the symbiote and these other demons, and I'm not going to get into that, reveal that the symbiote is going to move to a new host, Morana, the miscarried child, who is now grown and restored by Mammon. Ta-da!
Yeah. You know, honestly, if anyone wants to just speed this up and listen to it at 1.5 or 2 times speed on a podcast, I think you could add Benny Hill's Yakety sax to this. I mean,
so Al and Cyan team up to trap Morana in hell, and Al kills himself again. And now he's reborn on Earth as Jim Downing, who has the same powers as a Hellspawn. And that's where we're just going to stop it at this point, because now he's Jim Downing. He's no longer actually Al Simmons. And frankly, the mental gymnastics that we would have had to do to try and summarize this. At one point while we were writing this episode, we didn't even get to the stuff with Richard because we were literally just going to say, at this point, we don't know what the hell is going on, and we're not even going to try and summarize it. But I felt that would have been a little insulting to the fans of the character. You don't come here to hear us belittle these characters. They are very compelling characters. They are very interesting characters, but it's just, there's so much. And some of the stuff has been retconned and gone back over and back and forth. And if you want to read the Bible and Dante and all of these other religious texts to maybe get some better understanding of the character and these storylines, that's your prerogative. But it was difficult enough for me to read some of the issues and some of the summaries of the rest of these issues because I literally could not make heads or tail of what was happening. And we were sitting here saying, I don't even know how we summarize this to the listener.
Yeah, I could tell you where I dropped off as a Spawn fan, meaning I didn't read regularly anymore. That was the point. The discovers Wanda giving birth to God and Satan and that whole battle. That's where I kind of trailed off. So a lot of this is fairly new to me, and I'm not trying to say that the current stuff is better or worse than the older stuff. All I'm saying is there's been one thing that I've noticed incredibly consistent. If you go on McFarlane's webpage, you will find every cover of every issue, and they are all epic. Has nothing to do with the actual content, but they kept the artwork outstanding. Oh,
Todd McFarlane, say what you will about, the writing and the characterization. Todd McFarlane is an amazing artist. And that's the thing. I know there's a lot of artists that say, oh, well, I'm really good at drawing. Maybe I can get in my hand into writing. Joe Quesada is one of them. I know he is a divisive individual, but I don't know, even some of his harshest writing critics concede Joe Quesada is a hell of an artist. Same thing with Todd McFarlane. Say what you will about some of the stories that he's come up with, and he hasn't always written the character. He's walked away. He's left alone. But Todd McFarlane can draw his ass off. He started off with Spider-Man, and he did an amazing job with that. And that's why he became, so powerful and famous that he could help start Image Comics. Let's get into the issues now of Al Simmons. First and foremost, Al Simmons is an agent of hell who's an atheist. Before he died, Al Simmons had no religious belief. I'm not casting aspersions on people with religious belief or people without religious belief. I'm just stating a fact. Al Simmons was an atheist. Now he's an agent of hell who's caught up in a religious battle, and he makes a deal with the devil. That alone is a unique angle on what is, it's not a tired trope, but it's a common trope, the Faustian deal, the deal with the devil. But here you have a man who literally doesn't believe in God or a devil, but as he's dying, hears a voice and says, give me your soul and you can see your wife. And he says, okay. So what are just from, and again, I don't know how to parse that from a mental health standpoint while not offending either, both atheists and people of faith. But, well, that's why you've got the mental health degree and the experience, and I'm just the schmuck who reads the comics. So if you want to take a crack at it, it's all you, Doc.
Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is remove religion from the entire conversation. I'll get back to it, don't worry. But the Faustian deal, as you've already mentioned, I think is pretty important. I'm going to bring it back to something that's much more realistic. For those of you who don't know where we are, we're in Jersey. And no, we don't speak that way because you've been listening to us for so long.
Interestingly enough, though, side note, I did actually encounter someone like 2 weeks ago from Staten Island or Long Island who said unironically, oh, so you live in Jersey?
Wow.
No, dead serious.
Okay.
Like, it took everything I had to not laugh because I hear that as a stereotype all the time. Like, oh, you're from Jersey? What exit?
Right.
139B. What's your point?
The reason why I'm bringing it up is because we're very familiar with the idea of the mafia. In other words, people in a position of power who are able to wield that power to help others, quote unquote, help others. They put you in a position where you owe them big time. And you have two choices. You can do what they say to pay them back, or you can have your legs broken. Now just amp that up and you have the situation that Simmons is in. So from that standpoint, putting yourself in a situation where you're desperate enough to do anything for anyone is going to ramp up your stress level. It's going to make you do things and make decisions that you normally would not do. Now to bring the religion part back in. It doesn't necessarily have to be organized religion. It can be anything spiritual, because human beings in general develop a system above and beyond what we consider to be practical in terms of the physical world that we're in. You don't have to, quote unquote, believe or not. When you go to sleep, you have dreams. Dreams are often consolidations of things that have happened during your day, yes, but everyone has had experiences where dreams make, quote unquote, no sense. Even though they're incorporating different things, they can end up in complete fantasy. That has nothing to do with religion. That's just simply the fact that we love things that are, quote unquote, not possible. We have to have that level of imagination. So that's in everyone, regardless of if you're an atheist or not, or if you're agnostic, or if you're a deist. Okay, to identify what those mean. Agnostic indicates some level of belief, but nothing that you would automatically say is organized to the point that you're willing to act on it in a formal manner, like going to a church or a synagogue or anything of the sort. And deist meaning, yeah, there was something that set things up, a great watchmaker, you could say. But that happened and it's past. It's done. There's nothing else. We're on our own. We're doing what we have to. I know I'm not exactly addressing how that's going to create huge conflict, but in this case, once again, if you've ever heard the saying, you never find an atheist in a foxhole, you tend to cling to the idea when you're desperate that something is going to happen, something's going to change, something's going to save you. That's human nature. It's a defense mechanism. It's okay. He was on his deathbed, or, you know, just plain old dying, because I don't think he was in a bed per se. I don't remember. I'll be honest. But the point being, there was nothing else to shoot for. He just had to go with whatever was there at the time. Who knows how his thoughts would have gone one way or another, but this was a random opportunity. Did he have an alternative? I mean, I guess he could have said no, but then what's, you know, for an atheist, what's the point? You're going to be just in the ground or wherever you are anyway. So there's no downside. In a weird way, it created a situation where it wasn't even a Faustian bargain. It's just simply a bargain.
Well, that goes to Pascal's wager in terms of the belief in existence, or the belief in a god or not, that the benefit to belief in a god, whether or not he exists, far outweighs disbelieving in God if he doesn't exist, or if he does exist. That's a psychological and philosophical dispute and question that's been offered many, many times for hundreds of years. So that goes to your point. So the next thing we can discuss is Al's guilt over what he did before he died. And this is something that we see come into play throughout the issues. This is a man who was a CIA black operative and killed at will, without regard for himself or who he was killing. He was just following orders. And we've heard that, you know, the Nuremberg defense, etc. That carried a lot of weight with him. And as Spawn, he began to see a lot more of the repercussions of what it was that he was doing while he was Al Simmons. And that led to some very heavy and interesting stories. So, Doc, if you want to get on that for a bit.
Well, he certainly had the opportunity, as we already said, to make things right. I'm putting that in quotes and questioning it because clearly he can't reverse the fact that he killed lots of people. But the idea that he would have remorse after the fact, after everything has been done, is something that's common to humanity for the longest time. The main thing is someone had to show it to him. He didn't come to that on his own at the start. The fact that he got this deal and then gets to, piece together what this all meant lets him know, wow, I was acting as a horrible human being. In theory, he could have just said, if you're making an omelet, you break a few eggs. But instead, because the way the comic is written, he genuinely wants to make amends. He wants to change. It hits him hard. He doesn't have the natural coping mechanisms to say, well, if I made this mistake in the past, I don't have to carry it forward. Instead, whenever he gets an opportunity to do something different, even something positive, I'm not saying that it's a great thing to run hell, but the point is you have an opportunity to incite change in the position you have. Nope, not going to take it. Not going to do it. Not going to do it. I already screwed things up so badly. You don't want me to have that type of power. And then there are situations where he's dealing with, in theory, the good guys, and they don't like him because of what he's become. But at the same time, with the things that he's shown that he could do, he's had opportunities where, okay, well, what about if you were given your humanity? No, I can't do that. I can't do that. I did too many wrong things. Well, okay. So on one hand, yeah, you say that you want to make amends. You say that you want to do better. You say you want to improve. But when someone actually puts your feet to the fire, pun intended, you back off. The apprehension, the tension of all of that really gets to him. It doesn't stop him from trying. Otherwise, we wouldn't have any more comics. But you could see the struggle just repeat over and over in different variations. So from that standpoint, he definitely needs guidance from someone that's not trying to use ulterior motives. He seems to get good guides here and there, but it's clear they always are using him. Just drop the S, man. He's pawn.
Ooh, I like that. I like that. Did you just think of that? Or?
Yes. Yes, I did.
Well done, sir. Well done. Drop the S. He's just pawn. I like it. I had a point that I was going to make with respect to some of the stuff that you just said, but I can't think of it off the top of my head, so we'll just continue. So the last thing that I want to talk about is, and this is interesting, and I don't want to say it's entirely unique to Spawn, but it's something that I don't know that I don't remember seeing this in any other characters. The fact that his wife moved on after he died and then married his best friend and had a child with said best friend. Now, Wanda and Al tried repeatedly while Al was alive to have kids, and he thought it was Wanda's problem, that she was infertile. Then come to find out, now she has a kid with Terry, and then he realizes, oh my God, I was the one who couldn't have a kid. And this is before the miscarriage stuff, because I'm pretty sure that was stuff that got retconned. But the fact that he got to see his ex-wife move on after him with a new guy and have a kid and be happy, ostensibly, that is, that's heavy. What does that do to Al Simmons' psyche?
Well, first of all, he's less of a man. That's not my opinion. That's what I'm saying Al thinks of himself. I'll tweak it a little bit because when we did, oh boy, I can feel the flames now. When we did Scott Summers, we did mention him moving from relationship to relationship. So that part isn't necessarily as new. The child part and the fact that Al is no longer in the picture, I mean, that would be no different than a divorce. And the person, for whatever reason, the two people couldn't make it work, and the person had different expectations. If you find out that you failed on the most base human condition. What are we all doing here? We're organisms. You know, we're supposed to produce. That's it. That's what we do. We breed.
That is the biological imperative.
And he failed. CIA operative. Able to take lives. Not a problem. Throw them away. Creating one? All right. Well, in that case, at least you want to see if the person that they're with, sometimes you start, I don't know, comparing the scorecard. Not saying that it's a healthy thing to do, but you basically say, well, what kind of lover is he? What kind of friend are they? How are they handling themselves as a parent? I would be a better parent. It creates a rivalry, unfortunately, it's a one-way rivalry. The other person that's in the current relationship, no offense, doesn't really give a damn about the person that is already gone. In this case, he really is gone. He's dead. So,
well, that brings up an interesting point, because Al gets conflicted over the fact that Terry's the one who married Wanda, but he later eventually remembers that he told Terry before he died, if anything happens to me, take care of Wanda. Well, Terry took that to heart.
And I'll admit, I'm going to have to backtrack a bit on what I said, because that part I did just forget in the moment that is his friend. So yes, he would care about the person that's dead, but it's still not the same. I don't think Terry at any point, and I'll admit, this is me speculating, but I've had cases very similar to this, not with Hellspawn and dying, but cases similar where the person in the current relationship usually is not actively thinking of the person in the previous relationship. It's a one-way street for the most part. If, for example, Terry's wife, if Wanda brought it up, it might be a conversation, but if she didn't, that's not his first thought. It might be the thought of, oh my goodness, I can't believe my friend is gone. It might be his grief about it, but clearly his own actions indicate that grief doesn't override his current affection, his current love.
Well, he said Wanda would wake up in the middle of the night with a nightmare or a vision of Al, and Terry would say, I understand. You're never going to forget him, and I'm not asking you to.
Right.
I'm not going to ask you to forget him because I know you loved him. I loved him too in my own way, and we're never going to forget Al, and, he's always going to be a part of you. And then there was one issue where Al had the ability to consolidate a memory, and he took I think it was the memory of when he proposed to Wanda, and it was this really beautiful imagery. He shows up outside the window, and it's this little pink marble thing, and he's able to put the image into Wanda's head, because I think all of his memories were getting destroyed, and he could save like one, and it had to be like a really, really good and pure one.
Yeah, almost like Never-Ending Story-esque.
And that was the one that he saved, was that memory of being out in the boat on the lake when he proposed to Wanda, and he sent it to her, and he's like literally like creeping in the trees outside the house, and he sent it to her, and she just like, she remembers it, and then she's crying, and she's like, it's beautiful. And he was like, that's for you, Wanda. He's like outside the window, and Terry's like, what's going on? And she's like, oh, I just had a thought, and I just had a nice memory, and then it left me. Yeah. But so he does care. He loves Wanda deeply, and that's what keeps him going as Spawn.
Yeah. Yeah. But the way you just described it, he's the ultimate third wheel, just wants to be there, but there is no real comfortable way for him to wedge in.
This isn't co-parenting. This isn't a scenario where they had the kid together and he gets Cyan every other weekend or whatever. No, he's gone, and he can't tell Wanda that he's back. And I made reference to it last week in the Typhoid Mary. This is where he shows up, and he's in the body of a white guy. This is very early on. He uses his powers to create this white body for himself, which really throws him for a loop. And he shows up and he says something about he's from the ASPCA, and he just, he wants to be around Wanda just to see her and just to be near her. And that's the loops and the hoops that he will jump through just to get there. So treatment in universe. I don't even know where you begin, because here's a guy who is dead, who at one point had powers equivalent to God and Satan, is an agent of hell, is a pawn of hell, depending on the storyline, and can never get over that. He can never undo what he did, even though he had the abilities to remake the entire Earth. And he did. And all he did was just put everything back the way it was and made everyone forget about the rapture. And that was it. That was the only impact, quote unquote, that he had. And he could have very easily, he had the abilities to do anything he wanted. He could have gone back and given himself a brand new body and a chance to start over. And he didn't. But how do you treat something like that in universe? Can you?
I think I alluded to it earlier, but I need to prove to him that I am an actual positive agent to help him, not to use him, not to manipulate him, not to steal his power, none of that. Just simply, what is the next one step that you can take that would be overall good for society with your power? Whatever that is, I want to help you do that. I don't have any powers of my own. If it would help, I would gladly do research with, I don't know if I have to call on the Bible, the Necronomicon. I have no clue. But the point being, I want to let him know, honestly, in a weird way, I would be an apprentice. I don't want his power. I don't want his abilities, but I want to be able to walk in his shoes the best I can, of course, and just offer hints, offer guidance about what's happening. Be closer to a guidance counselor than a regular therapist, because I don't think he's at the point of directly addressing a lot of these issues head on. And even if he were, what would I be able to do with them? I can't say, oh, yeah, don't worry, I'll make you human. I can't say, oh, don't worry, I'll get you into heaven. I can't say, oh, don't worry, I'll make sure your wife is totally protected and secure. I can't do any of that. But those are his main goals, really, when you think about it. So all I can be is this fiduciary. I know as a physician, I have the Hippocratic Oath and stuff like that. The reason I'm bringing up that term, because that applies to all of society. You can treat things as if everything's a transaction and you have to get something out of it, or you can look at it as a situation where your main goal is to help this person regardless of if it helps yourself. And that's something he hasn't seen. That's what I would need to be. Interesting.
I like the concept of a fiduciary. I think it's, and as an attorney who handles estates and trusts and such, that's a notion just conceptually that I'm very familiar with, but we don't often see it applied to non-legal or financial settings. But I think the notion that we are beholden to one another in some respects, I mean, that's basic social contract theory, but that also just goes to general humanity. And that is something that I think in this day and age, we are all in sore need of more, certainly. Out of universe, the closest thing I could equate this to would be, I guess, someone who is incredibly guilty, because obviously we're not dealing with someone who's back from the dead. We're not dealing with the hell and heaven and such. But we are dealing with someone who is guilty over what they've done, who's no longer in the life of the person that they're in love with, and wants to make better strides towards being a better person and wants redemption. And that is, I think, a basic human thing that we can all sort of understand. But how do you get him there?
And I'm also going to even add on to that as well. The idea that, because I gave the practical example anyway, the idea that you've gone in the past to desperate lengths to either, in theory, improve your situation, but you only made it worse, or something along those lines that led to that guilt in the first place. So putting all of that together, a lot of forgiveness has to happen at some point. If it's a matter of you were desperate and you had very limited choices and you truly made what you thought was the best decision at the time with the information and resources you had, then that's actually straightforward. That's something that you can do with a standard cognitive behavioral therapy construct, because you didn't necessarily do something evil. You did something that turned out wrong. And there is a difference there. And I'm going to give a shout out to a book that I actually just read recently. The name of it is Thinking in Bets by Annie Duke. Annie Duke is a former World Series of Poker champion.
But her brother is,
he's also a champion, but the point being,
well, but who her brother's name?
I know, I don't remember it. I'm sorry. The only reason I'm bringing it up though is because she's also a psychologist, and the point of the book had nothing to do with poker. It was the fact that if you take information and you use that information properly and you still get a bad result, don't change your future actions based on the result. So with someone like an Al Simmons who has provided for his family with the money that he made from working for an agency where the only options really are to follow orders, he did his job well. it had negative consequences. If he can separate those two, it will allow him to not have guilt, but have grief. The idea that his actions may have had negative consequences, but now that he wants to make amends, he can move forward and separate that out. He can lay it to rest. That's one part.
Howard Lederer, by the way, is
Thank you. Yes. I remember that name. Okay. Anyway, the guilt and all of that kind of ties in directly with what I just said. I mean, unless the patient says that what they did was mean-spirited, it's rare for a patient to say that in general, if that's what they were doing at the time. If that were the case and they actually said that, then okay, that's a different level. Then it's first questioning, do you really want to change? If you do, great, because you're going to have to acknowledge just how off everything is now. You're shifting all of your existence. You're shifting the things that made you you. And that's not something that I'm going to be able to just sit down and talk about. You're going to have a full change in construct. You're going to have to rebuild your life from the ground up. I can't just automatically say, oh, well, you were making the best decisions possible. Well, if you weren't, I can't lie to you. So that's actually a way more difficult way to go about things. And thankfully, it's way less common. The relationship situation where, like I said, you had to move on because the relationship ended, whether you wanted it to or not. And now, to be honest with you, I did have a patient who tried to commit suicide by hanging because his girlfriend of, I think it was 8 years, just moved on with his best friend.
Oof.
Yeah. To say that because I work in an emergency room, he wasn't exactly ready to address that is an understatement. So
Understood.
I can't say automatically that it's something, I would never say like, okay, we'll just get over it. That's really stupid. It's more along the lines of, are you going to allow yourself to enjoy what you had? Because there was a reason why you, in this case, you married that person. There's a reason why you still have feelings for that person. It's clear that you don't consider them all bad. And especially if you didn't want to end the relationship, that's true. And let's say there was some acrimony. Let's say that there was a fight. And let's say it's one-sided and that other person was the only person that wanted to end it. That's painful, but that doesn't change the fact that at some point they felt differently. You definitely had a positive experience at some point. And it's okay for the timeline to have the roller coaster going, to have the dips, to have the ups and downs of anything, and for it to end. So when the roller coaster comes to a stop, it's okay to take your step off and try and find the next one. And I say it that way not to indicate that drama has to be in every relationship. I'm saying it to indicate that relationships always change over time. And I know we've said that, I don't know how many times at this point with this podcast. But if there is a way, if the person wants it, to have a more positive relationship with an ex, great. But recognize that it's going to have to be a two-way street. In other words, and it sounds silly to say out loud, but it's the truth. Like, okay, that means no unwanted contact. That means no stalking. That means no unwanted phone calls. That means no unwanted visits. All of those things. And I do lay that out to patients because, to use another one of those cliches, the heart wants what it wants. So sometimes people will act on that impulse because it's that strong. But sometimes the best thing that can happen is having that time by yourself because you start to reconsolidate who you were, not just who you were as a couple. And at some point, it usually happens that someone else comes along. Doesn't always. But then it's my job as the professional to allow that person to feel emotions for another person and point out to them that you're not evil for moving on. You're not wrong. These are all possibilities. They're not guarantees. But as long as you're there to help guide that path, which kind of ties into the in-universe thing too, a person can go pretty well. And in all honesty, if it's something where it was dramatic, I've heard this so many different ways, but the point being, as long as you give the person time, things can heal. If it was a shorter relationship and very intense, they might have huge spikes in how they're feeling, but it can be relatively short. As long as they're still productive, as long as they have other things in their life. Maybe not a whole bunch of chains and a symbiotic cape that, allows you to do other powers, but hey, that's all right. I'm sure you have a job. I'm sure you have other things you can do. I'm sure you have, hopefully, family that, yes, I always bring it back to the same things because they're still the healthy things that people should do. As long as you have those things, you're going to be okay. But you got to give yourself the opportunity.
So don't stalk my ex on Instagram.
No.
Okay.
And if you met her on Tinder, you better learn which way to swipe.
Got it. Swipe right all the time. So, no, I think that's very, very telling advice. And I think particularly with respect to the relationships, and again, I've said this before, that's the beauty of this show, is there are so many things, even though we talk about fantastic characters with otherworldly abilities, it all comes back to the human aspect, or at least it should. The good characters do. The good characters are relatable, and we find a way to discuss the things that make them relatable. And I think we can all have understanding of a situation where maybe someone else moved on when we weren't ready to, or we were the one who moved on and the other person wasn't ready. I've been in both of those scenarios. Neither one of them are easy. But over time, you do end up, hopefully, with a scenario that works for you. And it is possible to have a healthy relationship with an ex, friendly. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. There's a couple exes that I do actually talk to once in a great while. And then there are other exes that I haven't spoken to in years. It's not to say that I don't think of them. It's not to say that thoughts about them don't pop into my head. And I wonder what so-and-so is up to. But I never actually reach out to them because I don't need to open up that can of worms. But I think about it. So it does happen to the best of us. So in light of all of this, let's see what happens if we get Al Simmons on Dr. Issues' couch.
Hello, I'm Dr. Can we turn the lights on, please?
It would be best if you did not see me.
But Norm, if it makes you more comfortable, we can keep the lights off.
They're not off for my comfort, but for yours.
Point well taken. So what can I do for you today?
I fear there's nothing you can offer me other than pithy words.
I wouldn't even know where to begin. Is there some way we can, you can put me in your shoes?
Where I have walked, no man should desire to be my equal. If you wish to glean even the slightest understanding, I would recommend you begin reading every religious text you can acquire.
Sounds like you've been on quite the spiritual journey. I know that changes a man.
Your words ring truer than you could possibly comprehend, but it is not my spirit that I am concerned with at this moment.
Well, based on your description so far, I guess that means your mind? I mean, that truly is something that I specialize in, right?
No, I mean I speak of another. My wife, my ex-wife.
I see. Okay, your tone alone indicates that you still have some strong feelings for her.
She's the reason I am what I am now.
And what impact has this had on her?
She doesn't know of what I've become, and it is for the best. I fear what this knowledge would do to her. I love her far too much to burden her any further than she already is.
Oh, but that means you're bearing the brunt of the burden yourself. That can't be easy.
I didn't ask for easy when I made this deal. But if it gives her a better life, then that is the sacrifice I am forced to cope with.
Look, in order for you to move forward, you're going to need some closure on this. I mean, help me understand what your next goal is, because as much as you've been through, this sounds a lot harder than you could imagine.
My goal is to have this curse lifted from me, but that requires beyond an act of God.
I mean, I know a little bit about certain spiritual beliefs, so I take it this is a situation where good acts alone won't cut it.
All the good deeds in the world won't undo what I've done.
Okay, then let's start from a clean slate.
No such thing exists for anyone other than newborns.
A flat surface, then.
Are you asking me to lie down on the floor?
Okay, just work with me here. It's a metaphor. Here's one you could understand. Right now, you're in a deep hole. So what's the first step to climbing out?
Stop digging deeper?
Thank you. All right. Are you actually accomplishing that step?
I stopped digging a long time ago, but it doesn't mean there aren't those out there who are above me trying to bury me.
Huh, is that why you keep yourself in darkness?
As I said, the darkness is for your benefit, not mine.
I'm not so sure. You know what? Let's get to the bottom of this. All right. I see what we're working with.
This doesn't frighten you?
Like I said, I've been at this a while.
Thank you. So now what?
That's a good question. I mean, we're in uncharted territory. I mean, look, you've dealt with prophets and all sorts of people predicting the future. I can't do that. I'm going to put the ball back in your court. What do you vision your future to be like?
My ideal one or my expected one?
I'm not going to temper your expectations. Give me the ideal.
I find a way to lift this curse, and I find some way to see my wife again and touch her one more time.
Okay, I don't know if I can... I can't give that to you in this life, okay? But as far as I can tell, you're kind... You deal with eternity. So I can say some things. You will see her again in some form or another. So let's look at it this way. Would you rather it be here in your current state or one where you're on more even footing?
Your point is well made. But am I to wait for her to die? Not see her even though my every thought is about her?
What I'm trying to say is that you need to make a long-term plan and then adjust course along the way. Who knows? Maybe other opportunities or other situations will come up and you'll be prepared for them and you'll get better results than if you did nothing.
For what it's worth, Doctor, I will do my best to ensure your spirit is rewarded when the time comes. I came here expecting nothing, but your words have resonated in whatever is left of my heart.
Oh my gosh. I'll do my best to be worthy of your kindness.
And I will do the same.
So you just dealt with an agent of hell, and you're still alive and in one piece, and you're totally okay?
I think I could probably make some really cool art right now based on what I saw. But, yeah, otherwise I'm pretty cool.
Huh. So it's not that bad then.
Oh, don't get me wrong. I'm pretty sure my life expectancy just went down by about 6 or 7 years, but yeah, it's chill.
Huh. Okay. Hey, kudos to you, man. So that's going to wrap it up for Spawn. Thank you, Brian, for recommending him. And if and when that Jamie Foxx, Todd McFarlane film ever does come out, we can revisit Spawn and maybe get into some of the later stuff, or maybe we can touch on Sam and Twitch as characters. But, you know, we'll try to be timely, I suppose. If the time comes. Todd McFarlane's been talking about the Spawn film for years, and I'll believe it when they actually start shooting. I think they hired like a director of cinematography or something, or photography, some special effects person. So they're moving closer and closer, but until the cameras actually start rolling, I'm not going to hold my breath.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything to add to that.
I do think I want to watch the HBO cartoon, though, afterwards. Maybe I'll talk to Brian. I'll see if he still has those DVDs, see if I can borrow them. That's going to do it for this week. So next week, we're going to be covering The Stepford Cuckoos to tie in with The Gifted Season 2, which premieres next week on Fox. And then the week after that, we're going to do Ra's al Ghul. And then is the Walking Dead Season 9 premiere episode, where, again, as we said at the top of the episode, you get to decide. Do we do Rick Grimes, Negan, or the Governor? So go to capesonthecouch.live right now and vote on the Google form. Or it's also at the top of our Twitter feed. It's pinned there, so you can check it out. And while you're also at our website, make sure to check out the site where you can donate to my Extra Life page and help me get one step closer to shaving my head for the kids to benefit Children's Miracle Network. So that's going to about wrap it up. Doc, you got anything else you want to add?
Well, I'd just like to say that hell sucks.
Good point. So for Doc Issues, I'm Anthony Sitko. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next week.
Capes on the Couch podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Dr. Issues is a psychiatrist, but he is not your psychiatrist and does not have knowledge of your individual situation. For any personal mental health concerns, please consult your own healthcare providers. For medical emergencies, please call 911 or the designated number in your area immediately. Remember that you are not alone and help is out there.